Okay, folks, so we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. My name is Kevin Madison, and I'll be your friendly dungeon muser this evening, this afternoon, this morning, wherever this finds you, whenever this finds you. I'm just going to double check and make sure that our stream is live right now. This is going to be our look back on the year that was 2025 on the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. Looks like we are going live. That is great. So, this is going to be a look back at the games we ran on the channel, the changes we saw to some of the games we're running. We're going to talk about some of my favorites from the channel, which is obviously going to be a subjective ranking. But we'll talk about what I felt were standouts for games that we ran. I'm going to talk a little bit about the games that we have as ongoing games and what we have planned for 2026. At the time of recording, it is January 1st, 2026. I don't have a discount code. Actually, one thing I will say is from the outset is I don't have a current discount code for Noble Knight as of yet because I haven't contacted them about the updated discount code yet, but I'll do that as soon as I get off stream. But as is always the case with these overviews, if you do have any questions or comments or whatnot about this, I'll take a look at the chat generally as the days as the stream is going on, and then I'll also double check at the end to see if there are any questions, and I'll try and address any questions that you might have there if I haven't answered them as we go. So let's get going. So over the course of the 2025 year, we ran actually less games than we have. I haven't double checked the number, but it feels like it is less. We ran either, depending on how you're counting, 29 or 30 different games over the course of the year. We've run upwards of like 50 something in previous years, but this year we kept it to more consistent games. That either meant we're spending more time with one-shots and such on certain games, or we were seeing more consistency in our other ongoing games, so we were able to play those for a longer period. I honestly don't know which of the two that is the case, but the games we ran over the course of 2025 include Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Traveler 2nd Edition from Mongoose, Pathfinder 1st Edition, Soulbound, the Warhammer Age of Sigmar RPG, Shadow of the Weird Wizard. It's the successor game to the Shadow of the Demon Lord game written by Robert Schwab. Imperium Maledictum, one of the two Warhammer Fantasy 40k games published by Cubicle 7. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition, which is soon to have a 5th edition coming out. The Dark Eye, Germany's classic RPG. We played 5th edition of that. Dragonbane, the successor game to, I always get the name wrong, Daemon och Dominar or something like that, or Dragon och Dominar. Anyway, it's a Swedish RPG based on a heavily modified version of the basic role-playing system. It's an incredibly popular game. I don't know why I'm explaining what that one was. But Dragonbane, Rogue Trader, one of the many Warhammer 40k games published by Fantasy Flight Studios. D&D 5th Edition, Mass Effect RPG, a fan-made game that was based heavily on Spycraft and 2nd Edition, and Star Wars Revised Edition, Westeros Fantasy Roleplay, which was my mashup of A Song of Ice and Fire RPG with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition, The One Ring 2nd Edition, Death Watch, another of the RPGs published by Fantasy Flight in the Warhammer 40k universe, Fantasy Craft, a successor game to the D&D 3rd Edition school of games, that made some substantial changes to it. Star Wars Revised, Star Wars RPG Revised. That's the second version of a Star Wars game published by Wizards of the Coast. Mithras, Classic Fantasy, RuneQuest 6th Edition, effectively. Flames of Freedom, that's a powered by Zweihander game that was set in the American Revolution. Champions, the 6th Edition of the Hero system. Fantasycraft Midnight, which was a mashup of Fantasycraft with the classic Midnight setting. Also from Fantasy Flight Studios, curiously enough. Cult Divinity Lost, we played a single session of that. World of Ashes, which was a mashup of the Worlds Without Number and Ashes Without Number role-playing games published by Kevin Crawford. Batman Gotham City Chronicles RPG, Symbaroum, the original RPG, not the 5th edition version, Wrath and Glory, another of the Warhammer 40k games published by Cubicle 7, Mothership, the classic OSR kind of horror sci-fi game, Draw Steel, the successor game written by MCDM as kind of a successor to 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Fading Suns, which I can't remember the edition we played. I want to say 5th, but I think that might be the case. In any event, Fading Suns, Marvel Multiverse RPG, that's the most current version of the Marvel role-playing game out, and Conan, the role-playing game published by Mongoose Studios. Mongoose Publishing. That is about 4 or 5 year old game though. So anyway, that is those are the games that we got to the channel. And if you break those down into sort of categories of types of RPGs, there are 2 that could be really seen as horror RPGs, 3 that would be viewed as superhero RPGs, 9 as science fiction RPGs, and a whopping 17 that would be viewed as fantasy RPGs. I'm not sure how that compares to previous years, but it does seem like it's a lot of fantasy. And I mean, we do tend to run a lot of fantasy between Dungeons and Dragons in the various editions and then various Warhammer games. But yeah, fantasy was very well represented in our games, and actually will be in my top 5 or 6 games as well. I've got a kind of a top 5 and then an honorable mention, but the honorable mention is not, it deserves a place in that kind of top 5. I just did not have space for it. So we managed to continue on with many of our campaigns as well. One of the things that has been a challenge over the past year has been that life has interfered with the ability for some of our campaigns to continue on. People have had things come up in their personal lives, or scheduling has changed or whatnot. So there's a number of campaigns that we just have not been able to carry on with. And I often, if I'm sharing information about the campaigns dying, or if it is something that I feel is appropriate to be shared with the viewers, I'll share that information. But when it isn't something that I can share, at least not at the time, I trust that viewers will understand that the reason we are doing it is either it is boring logistics, and that is the reason I'm not going to bother sharing why we're not able to carry on with a certain campaign, or there's something else that's gone on that I don't want to share. And it is sometimes in respect to player privacy or whatnot. So if we are not carrying on with the game that you have particularly come to enjoy, I apologize for that. But if I'm not sharing reasons for that, there is purpose behind that refusal to share that information. More often than not, it is just a matter of scheduling, to be honest. As people's work circumstances change, or their living circumstances change, and they find themselves unable to continue on with the games that we're able to play. And some of the games we play have no difficulty carrying on with even as few as 2 players in some cases. But other games, they just do not function without that kind of like 4 or 5 players in them. Or we find ourselves at a place in a campaign where we really can't carry on without that full kind of quorum there. And inevitably what ends up happening too, because we do play, all of us play a lot of games, the players, whatever they play in the channel, as well as their own home games, everybody on the channel is, as a roster player, is a DM as well. So they're running their own games, they're playing in other games, and they're playing in all the games of the channel. It is difficult to keep the momentum for a game when you do take time away from it. So that is a problem as well. That said, 2025 saw a return of a campaign that we had set aside 3 years prior. That was our Legacy of the Crystal Shard campaign, using in part the Icewind Dale adventure that actually was published after we had started playing it. That campaign we had been playing with AD&D 2nd edition. We switched over to Castles and Crusades about a year into that campaign, maybe. And then one of the players who was a fixture in that campaign, passed away. If you've ever seen us toast to Mo when someone is muted, it's because of that. Maurice used to do that quite often. yeah, when Mo passed away, it was difficult to really contemplate how to carry on with that campaign. I'm going to talk about that one a little later when I talk about plans and kind of like observations I've had. But it is a testament to the fact that no game is ever truly dead. I make a point of not sharing campaign plans or what the outcome of certain adventures would be with players, because you just never know whether you're going to get an opportunity to get the gang back together, as it were, and carry on with that campaign. So while we have had some games that have had to be shelved for the time being, and we don't have a time in mind that we're going to return to them, they're never gone. One added benefit of having everything recorded on the channel is that it's very easy for us as players and GMs to go back and refresh our memories on what happened in the last couple of sessions, and also to do the sort of bring everyone up to speed, because players are going to have different memories of what happened during different games. So anyway, so that's it. 28 games. I mean, we did not miss any substantial amount of time on the channel, so I don't attribute this fewer amount of games to that. I think in the second half of the year, we were better at planning and executing shorter campaigns. In particular, our Champions Dracula Dossier game had a fixed length of time that we were going to play it, and we were able to bring that one to a resolution. But I'm going to talk about that a little later as well. It was also interesting this past year. We did a series of 6 games that were player picks. In the end of 2024, I had asked the players to vote on I can't remember if it was top 3 or top 4. It was even top 6. But in any event, give us like a list of your top games that you would really love to play in 2025. And the 5 games, see if I can remember these, the 5 games that came out as the top for the entire player roster were Fading Suns, Mothership, what else? Fading Suns, Mothership, Flames of Freedom, the One Ring Second Edition, and the Mass Effect RPG. And I'm looking at my list here. Which of these was a pick? There's one more I'm forgetting, but I don't remember what it was. Mothership, Fading Suns. Gosh, maybe there's only 5 actually. I may be wrong about that. We also played last year was maybe it was Dragonbane? Might have been Dragonbane, actually, now that I think of it. Last year, in fact, I think it was, because I think that's what prompted the change for our charity campaign. So the other 2 first off, before I get off track, that exercise was really, really fun to play. In particular, Fading Suns was a game that I owned, but had not really got to the table. I was late to that game. It was very big in the mid to late 90s. And then at that time, I was more into the World of Darkness games. And so what disposable income I had was going to those games or to Shadowrun, not to that. So, or the GDW games for that matter. But it's a really, really good game. It's very complex, but it turns out I really like complex and fussy games. If anyone's watched our Dangerous Journeys sessions, you'll know that I am a big fan of fussy games, and it is a bit of a fussy game, but it's a really fascinating setting, and it was a lot of fun. And I would not have run that. I would never have pulled it off the shelf had it not been the players who prompted that. Mothership as well is a really interesting surprise for that. I really enjoyed running that session. It was it's not a game I think I would run on an ongoing basis, just because I know that I prefer to. My ideal sort of time dabbling with a game is at least like 6 sessions. So having that time to spend with it, I don't know there's enough game there for my likings or for my own sensibilities, but for the one session, it was a huge amount of fun to prep and to run. So I really, really enjoyed that. And again, would not have run that had the players not prompted me. Most everything else that was on that list are things that I probably would have ended up running on my own or whatnot. But the really cool thing with that exercise, Dragonbane is another one I sort of wrote off because I did not appreciate how it has a nice crunch to it in a way that is deceptive when you first look at it. And I'll talk more about Dragonbane a little later, but that was another one that I had sort of written off. The players prompted me to get it to the table, and I enjoyed it enough for it to be our first charity marathon. We did a 16-hour stream of that game, and it's one of my favorite single adventures I've ever run. Not only because the incredible group of players, the execution came out really well, which is always a bit of you're not always sure if you're gonna be able to land that that plane, as it were. And the game was terrific. Like, it really was the correct choice for that particular type of session. So Dragonbane was another one that was a really pleasant surprise. We're not doing the player picks this year, but many of the games we have, I'm going to talk about for 2026, are games that were selected as a result of that similar process, where it's more the players making the pick rather than me making a pitch to the players. Let's play this. The other thing, so we did, there was the charity marathon, which was just a huge amount of fun to prep and run, and it was not nearly as exhausting as I thought it was going to be. I genuinely thought I was going to be dragging ass for days afterwards, and it did not prove to be the case. We made the distance with, I think we had either 5 or 6 players by the end of the fourth chapter of the series. And it was awesome. It was really, really fun. If you haven't watched that, unlike most of our videos on the channel, it's not listed under the live. The entire 16-hour stream is listed under the videos section. So if you have not seen that and you do want to see it, you can find that under there. It's just hidden in a different tab on the Dungeon Musings channel than normally is the case. YouTube doesn't let you archive streams longer than 12 hours. So you're going to lose the feed or the chat anyway for a longer stream. But I was able to load the entire 16 hours as one big chunk. So you're welcome to watch that there. Let me see here. Any other general comments? I guess as our ongoing games, our Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay campaign is going into its 3rd year this year. Our various Warhammer 40K games that we play on the Fridays before that one is going into its 4th year now. Our Spires of Paradar campaign, which is a Pathfinder 2nd Edition game, that is going into its 5th year now. And Night Below is going into its 6th year. Night Below is our Wednesday night game that we've played alternatingly with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition, D&D 3.5, Castles and Crusades, and Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition, both 2014 and 2024. And Pathfinder 2, actually. We did a war story using Pathfinder 2 for that one. So those games are all ongoing, and I'll talk maybe about those a little, like kind of at the end of the other things. So let's talk about my favorite games. My favorite games, this is my top 5 that I ran for the year, and I'll tell you a little bit about why. I'll grab a little sip of coffee as well. Anna Banana is with me as well. We'll see if we hear from her tonight as well. So number 5 for me, Champions 5th Edition. So Champions 5th Edition, we got a chance to play, actually play sessions. There was not a huge amount of them. We got to play about maybe 6 or 7. No, that's not true. It was close to 10, actually, but with the Dracula Dossier stuff. So Champions, if you're not familiar, this is the most recent version of the Hero System 6th Edition superhero-based RPG. The way that I think the best to understand what the game is and what it has to offer at the table is it is a superhero combat simulator that also has rules for like skills and so forth in there. Its primary strength is that it is an enormously fun combat system for superheroes. It also, for if you are of the persuasion to enjoy very detailed character creation, a la GURPS or Rollmaster, it is a type of point-based system that can be an enormous amount of fun. It's also, it has tons of tools and resources for streamlining that. So if you don't want to sit down and calculate everything from whole cloth, you can use templates or archetypes. You can use pre-made characters as well. There's two incredible source books that give classic Marvel characters basically with the serial numbers filed off, but ready to play as starting characters in Champions. Champions has a nostalgic place in my heart as well, and has for years. It is one of the first RPGs I owned as a child. It's one of my favorite. It has remained one of my favorites for to read more so than to run. There's a long gap where I did not run Champions, but I got back to it a couple of years ago, and this past year has been my favorite time with that RPG. We played Dracula Dossier, which was a product, a mega campaign product originally published for Night's Black Agents that I've talked about many times on the channel. It's an incredible campaign. I'm just not crazy about the gumshoe system that drives the related RPG Night's Black Agents. And it's not any slight against the game. It's just the way that you play that game. Just, I find it hard to get myself to think in the way that you're going to let a story flow out that way. I just recognize that I'm a little bit more of a simulationist GM than I am. The more abstract we get, the less invested and less tangible I feel it is, which is part of the reason why I like a game like Champions. We used Champions as one of the games this year to play a 1963 adventure set in Berlin, where the heroes were trying to track down. They were playing super spies, not superheroes, and they were trying to track down the someone who had apparently escaped a massacre at a listening post by the British spy agency Excalibur, taken from the excellent Agents of Excalibur, or drawn in inspiration from, at least, from the Agents of Excalibur campaign for Rivers of London, written by Sam Vale. You can find that on Drive-Thru. Agents of Excalibur is excellent. Champions does, I don't know, like, Champions asks a fair bit of the players. It is one of those games where the players do need to be mindful of power usage and of the various tactics that are available to their characters through combat maneuvers and such. So for a casual player who is it's important to have a character that does not have a lot of complexity or decision making at the table, but the visceral feel of combat in superhero combat in Champions feels more tangible, I think, than any other superhero RPG. We run a couple other ones that were really good this year as well. The Batman Gotham City Chronicles game was so much better than I thought it was going to be. I don't mean to damn it with faint praise. It genuinely was one of my favorites. It was very close to being in the top 5, but Champions, between the Dracula Dossier game and the few sessions of the Guard we got to play with Champions, we played a lot of training scenarios where the players could get comfortable with the different powers they had. Oh, it's just a great game. But it is a game that asks a fair bit of the players, and that is not always fair. In particular, if you have players who are playing, for one, who are not interested in superheroics, two, who are not interested in that level of complexity. If they're satisfied with a much lighter level of crunch, there are other superhero RPGs that offer very close to what you get from Champions, just not quite as detailed. Champions also is very much still a product of its era. This one was published, I think, in the 2010s. Let me check here. 2009, not bad, Madison. So 2009 is when this one came out. I was off by a year. But there is still some stuff where, like, if you're facing a supervillain's stats, because it's a clear kind of, what is it, logarithmic? No, or arithmetic, I guess, scale in the they're just going to be so much more powerful than you are. We got to see a mega villain at the table at the end in the final session of our Dracula Dossier campaign, and like, it knocked every hero out. It just was barely driven off by virtue of some good tactics by the player and some good rolls. We started playing with a narrative metacurrency with that game for the first time. I've used a different kind of narrative metacurrency in the game that they suggest in the 6th edition called Luck. That I didn't like a lot because it allowed players to basically dictate dice results. What are you crying for? Someone's crying. Sorry. If you hear crying in the background, it's because I'm neglecting my dog. The suggested one, you at start of a session roll a number of dice. You get a number of points you can use to change the dice results. I am not crazy about that because it's a little too firm. Anna, what are you crying about? Jeez Louise. What I'd prefer is the reroll. Reroll still keeps that what is fun about playing with dice in a role-playing game, which is to have random results. So the reroll stuff, while sometimes it was frustrating for, if you roll the same thing on Roll20, which often happens to some of the players on our channel, you end up with, the exact same results. But I don't know. I mean, I think that fits. That to me felt better than having the way that they recommend. So all that is to say that the superheroes fighting villains who can just, by virtue of the math, will beat the snot out of your players. It is something that does feel like appropriate to the sensibilities of that kind of game, but I'm not sure it feels great as a player to have had, like, if you're fighting minions and just beating the shit out of them and easily defeating them. It's sometimes frustrating to face villains where they're just better at stuff than you are. So I don't know. I mean, like, I think if you've got players that are okay with that, or I guess to mitigate that, I would say that the game also has fantastic team up rules. So there's a really neat way of rewarding teamwork by the players when you're facing those big adversaries, which again feels very thematically appropriate for the source material. It's been now, 30 plus years that I've enjoyed this game, and this has been the year where I've been able to run it the most and the most successfully. So it definitely earns a place in my top 5. I absolutely love this game. But unfortunately, we're not going to be playing. I don't have it in the schedule for next year. It is one of those things that you just get to enjoy, appreciate it for when it comes along. Number 2 or number 4, I guess I'm going up here, is a stalwart classic, Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition. Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition, I will say, my praise of this is going to be mitigated by the use of optional rules from the Up in Arms supplement. We use the group advantage optional rules, suggested rules, I should say, that are out of the Up in Arms supplement. So the rules as written in this version for advantage are tedious as fuck, and I would never, it would definitely impact my enjoyment of the game. Group advantage, phenomenal. The gameplay in this stands out to me. I guess first off, it is a very complex game. There's a lot of nooks and crannies where there's hidden bits of rules where if you miss them, in the equipment section about breaking armor, then you're going to forget about it. Or if you miss the last sentence in certain paragraphs, you're going to miss something. They have, at the time of recording, a 5th edition that is coming out, but 5th edition they say, completely 100% backwards compatible, which makes me think it's going to be consolidation of some of the updated rules that they introduced in a couple supplements. Monsters were slightly revised in the Imperial Zoo book. Magic was slightly revised in the Winds of Magic book, and the combat rules were slightly revised in the Up in Arms book, which makes me think they're going to be incorporating those as the default way of play. I may be wrong about that, but the core mechanic in this one is a D100, just like it was in 1st edition, 2nd edition, but the comparative outcome, comparative success level is the core thing that drives everything in this game. Not even comparative, your success level. The success level you get, which is how much under your stat that you rolled, that it drives everything for interpreting the outcome of any task resolution, whether that's combat or skill checks or contested things or progressive skill challenges. And it is such an elegant and clever mechanic that is augmented by the talents in the game, which often give you a bonus to your success level. So if you've got a 70 in a score and you roll a 50, that's a success level of 2. Now, I can't remember. I might be having this. I can't remember if it's the tens digit or if it's the difference between the two, because there are many games that we play that do different. I think it is the difference between the two in this one. So if you roll a 0, or you rolled a 5, say an 05 as your skill check, when your skill is a 70, that would be 7 success levels, which may be modified by other things. Combat relates to related success levels. So there's always some outcome that comes from exchange of combat, and critical harries, even if they're unsuccessful, result in critical hits on the attacker. So there is a constant source of peril that goes on in the game. I just find that the game it's got very interesting character creation stuff that the players seem really invested with. I don't interface with that as much as what the players do. So just from a GM's perspective, it's very easy to run with relatively little mechanical prep. There's tons of source books out that have tons of stats in them that you can easily make use of. And honestly, one of the things with the complexity of this game is if you only remember 70% of the rules, you're still going to have a phenomenal time. We forgot some aspects of the rules until later on, and then we over the course of our campaign, we've remembered things and been like, oh right, shit, yeah, we could have done that. And it doesn't really matter. Like, they're all small situational things that, if you're the sort of person who is fixated on like, oh, I wish I had known that at the time because it would have made a critical difference, we haven't encountered anything like that. It is supported by a group of players in that game who are actively interested in learning the game. So like, we're constantly reminding everybody of like, oh no, this is how that works. I routinely will get shit wrong, in particular with shields. It took me forever to learn how shields work that the players knew better. But the gameplay it has that fun, rewarding element to learning the game as well. And the more I learned about it, the more interesting things I could do with adversaries in it. The advancement has been quite good too, where players have started pretty basically, and I can't remember what everyone's XP is at this point, but we generally award 100 XP per session, I think, in that one. And we're like, which means they're probably about 3,000 XP, I guess, because we're about 30 sessions into that one, maybe more. But in any event, the combats can run from tense single target encounters all the way to, we had a sprawling fight that ran through the Skaven Warrens underneath one Imperial city, and it spanned about 3 sessions. We also made use of some of the mass combat rules in the final session of that one, and it's just a really, really good game. That whether you're turning your mind to more skill-focused adventures or combat-focused adventures or exploration, focused adventures, there's that core mechanic of the game means it's going to be reliable in a way that you can make some really interesting subsystems and mini games and things like that with that core mechanic that allow the players who are good in those certain skills to really shine, and the ones who struggle in those areas to really show that like they are struggling. But if they're against someone who is equally struggling, or they're contesting with someone who's equally struggling, you'll have an outcome. There's not the constant miss, fail stuff you do see in other D100 based games where the outcome is what's compared, and if 2 characters fail, then nothing really happens. I think I've been reading BRP recently about that, and that's one kind of complaint I have about that particular game, although that one has optional rules similar to this. The setting as well is just is super fun to play in. It has all those fantasy tropes to them, but you can also lean into more silly or more serious or scary things, some of the monsters that are in the setting, or some of the baddies, as it were, whether it's chaos or vampires or Skaven, are just uniquely Warhammer. And then the tensions between the species is really quite interesting too. If you like Dragonlance, there's a much more interesting, I think, conflict between the elves. I should say interesting. I mean, that's going to be subjective, but I really like the tension between the dwarves and the elves in this as well. That proved a really interesting point in one of our adventures. And yeah, I mean, I think it's also a game that it even though it is quite complex, you can get folks up to speed and making good decisions with it with low experienced characters pretty quickly and have a terrific time. It's also a game where you can lean into to all the sort of different aspects of story that sometimes some other fantasy RPGs struggle with. Like, there are some fantasy RPGs that are great combat simulators, but they don't really have much in the way of skills for when you're outside of fights. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition has both. So you get to have satisfying tactical fights while also having, if you choose to run a campaign where the only time swords are drawn is at the very end to confront a villain, with a strictly investigative or espionage or intrigue-based campaign, there's tons of game mechanic there for you to engage with to be able to actually play a game while you're doing the role-playing part of the game. Love this game. Can't wait to see what 5th edition has to offer and to see where they go next. Actually, I know where they're going next. They mentioned some of the stuff, but in a recent update. So that's number 4. And you know what? It may have actually this may have belonged as number 3 now that I think of it, just because I really, really, really enjoyed that. All right, so number 3 is Fantasy Craft. So Fantasy Craft is, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, Fantasy Craft is an RPG published by Crafty Studios. I think it's Studios. Crafty Games, LLC. Fantasy Craft is a game that came out in around the same time, actually, as that Champions book, 2009-ish, 2008, 2009, the end of sort of the 4th edition era, before 5th edition what do you call it? 5th edition playtesting was started, and during the ascent of Pathfinder 1 as the successor to 3.5, D&D 3.5. Fantasy Craft is a brilliantly designed game that stands on the shoulders of Spycraft 2nd edition and Spycraft 1st edition, which were both espionage games released under the OGL, the Open Gaming License. Fantasy Craft definitely leans more into the heroic side of things. The characters you're playing are much more cinematic heroes. It's not to say they're not vulnerable, but they are definitely standouts right from first level. So the heroic part of the play is really good. It says it's optional, but the adventures seem to all suggest using it as as a way of setting difficulties. It has things that are level parity, so the kind of level-based difficulty numbers and damage output and defenses that we would see in D&D 4th edition, Pathfinder 2nd edition, Starfinder 1st and 2nd edition. That is present here, where skills are relative to level, challenges of the monsters are relative to level. It also has a huge assortment of rules for customizing your own character, and every class has abilities in it that just feel broken. They feel so good and so fun that it feels like you're getting away with something by playing those classes, but every one of them has it. We played a bunch of one-shots with this, some set in fantasy settings with like elves and stuff like that, some set in a setting I used for years of Thule for our Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game, and then we started playing a campaign using Midnight. And I think that it's not the game that is to blame for that campaign not carrying on, we switched to Draw Steel for that, and we'll be playing Draw Steel going forward on the Fridays. More it's the setting, I think, than it is the system. But Fantasy Craft, the one thing, if it does have a shortcoming, it's the magic system feels a little undercooked. It's perfectly functional, but it's hard to distinguish how a priest caster would be from a regular spellcaster, other than if you want to have them both be able to cast spells the way that those classes can in traditional D&D. Priests and whatnot they do have access to spells in Fantasy Craft, but they're way more limited. The actual sorcerer, or mage class, it has much more versatility and includes, depending on how restrictive you're going to be, it can include healing as well. So it sort of fills the role. Any spellcaster can kind of feel like, or at least as far as their selection of spells are concerned, can kind of feel like any other given spellcaster. There is a way to manage that in the game because each skill or spell comes from a specific college, so you can kind of restrict the access of that, but there's not really guidance on that. And you conversely get access to a huge amount of spells at first level, even ones you can't cast yet. So if you restricted the schools, it feels like you would end up having to pick levels of spells that you may never advance to if you did restrict those things. So it's not to say that it doesn't work. Like we have played spellcasters in the game, and spellcasters have, because of all the other elements in the game, feel very different from one another. But if you are the kind of player who likes playing spellcasters and want to have lots of different options to pick from, really does feel kind of underbaked in that sense. And if you like playing clerics in D&D, it's a very different play experience for clerics in Fantasy Craft. All that said, I don't think it's easy to take Fantasy Craft and run a traditional D&D type campaign, but for its own thing, it's so good, and we've had so much fun with it. We've had some really, really great sessions, and it's something I'm going to do more with in future. It's just there's other games that do similar things right now that are occupying the space I think that Fantasy Craft does. Fantasy Craft, I think, is fantastic for one-shots, for short games, because you can get a really satisfying game out of a first-level adventure and first-level characters where you're not burdening the players with too many things to keep track of for a brand new character, while still getting a really exciting and one I guess thing I should mention. One innovation in the game is that you get action points, and action points can explode. The dice you roll is set by your level. You generally start with 3 per session, but they explode, and they can be used for damage as well. So you can have times where if you're spending it on damage, you can get a really big hit. Hit points are commensurately larger, and they're split into 2 different pools. But this game also has some of my favorite rules for minions. In any game where there's a damage save that you make based on how much damage they've taken. And I don't know, Fantasy Craft I've had an enormous amount of fun writing for this and running this game this year. The XP award, I think that with that, I was going to run this again. I'd probably just say I'll do Milestone. It is a colossal pain in the ass to calculate XP, particularly if you don't specifically set out what things you're using beforehand. But no, it's one of my favorite games, and what a pleasant discovery of this one too. I'd had people who had referred to it before. This was kind of my dangerous journeys for the year, a game that did not get its own due. There's only one real source book for this out in print, and there's a PDF supplement for another class, for a paladin. Is it a paladin? It might be called a Templar, but yeah, phenomenal game. Really, it's one of those games too with this, and I mean, you could do it with just this, but with this, I think, and the companion, you could run unlimited amounts of games. It also has rules in here for converting OGL monsters over, which means that any of your D&D 3rd or 3.5 books, or your Pathfinder first edition bestiaries, all that stuff is ripe for plunder, and you can convert monsters over to any level. If you want to have a first level red dragon, you can do that with this game. It'll be dangerous as hell, but it will not be unfair in the way the conversion works. So really, really great game. It doesn't speak to the strength of the game that I don't have plans for it for the coming year, but yeah. All right, next up is actually something I may be accused of recency bias with this one, but it is the Conan role-playing game. Now, this is the Mongoose version of the game that was published in 2002 or 2003. Where is this? 2003. So this will be 23 years old now. Wow. This one is based also on the OGL, on the 3.5 engine, but it is substantially changed and tweaked in a couple of ways. Not as much as what Fantasycraft is, where it's a very different game with like damage saves and minions and shit like that. If you're familiar with D&D 3.5 or 3rd edition, this is going to be about 80 to 85% the same. Many of the same things that are existing in 3.5, like opportunity attacks, like a full list of all the different actions you can take, the same action economy, the idea of like 5-foot step, all that stuff is still in here. What has changed is you've got different defenses. So your defenses are split into parry and dodge. You also have armor does actually reduce the damage you take, and most weapons are sort of raised commensurately, so they do more damage than what you see in other 3.5 games or 3rd edition games. You also have a lot of sort of situational little things where, you know, you may not be able to dodge here, or you may need to parry here, or there's a great way of implementing finesse weapons where if you beat the defense of the target, so think of AC as your defense, if you beat it by an amount equal to the DR, the damage reduction, then you're actually able to slip your blade in, which just feels really appropriate for the setting. The character classes are really interesting. The character advancement is really interesting, and it, I think, has my favorite implementation of sorcery in any Conan RPG. I will say that it is very much a product of its time. So, and it's also a product of its source material. So there is going to be some stuff in the source book that is going to be objectionable to some people. So, you know, and there's also very dated language in the game as well. One of the schools of sorcery is called the Orientalist school, I believe. This is, I feel like, for one, it is a product of when you are trying to recapture a story's sensibilities from the 30s, which is going to inherently have some of those racist qualities to them. It also has a very like racial essentialist association with different races. In this sense, it's not like elves and dwarves and whatnot. It's like all Cimmerians have these qualities. It is something you can very easily work out the way that, you know, the way you do with other 3.5 or other games where you don't want to have that stuff in there. But and you can also quite easily, I think, determine what is, you know, cultural and what is, you know, quote unquote racial for it. But I think if you're engaging with a Conan RPG, you're gonna inevitably wrestle with some of those thornier issues with a thing written by a guy from, you know, the 1930s whose extensive experience was living in rural Texas. So again, no slight necessarily to the limitations of his experience. The product of his writing, it continues to inspire, and I think this game gives the most fun game experience for me. The crunchiness that comes from the 3.5 system feels really at home in this game. I really have enjoyed the 2D20 game in the past and run it a bunch of times, but I kind of burned out on the 2D20 system in general right now. And particularly if you're playing with a larger group, I find that game, the pace of play feels glacial. And in this game, while there's lots of other things that you could not complain, but you could rightly point to as reasons not to enjoy it, like having a track attacks of opportunity, or all having to keep track of feats and different bonuses and stuff like that. I found that I ran this about 5 times in 2024, and then we just ran the the holiday campaign using this. Super, super, super fun. It reminds me of all the things I loved about 3.5, as well as adding in little things like having a narrative meta currency called fate points. We added in one extra option that I borrowed from Savage Worlds to it, but otherwise pretty much ran the game as written. And it's just having those fate points where you're able to re-roll or not die, or with our optional rule access feats. If you happen to be somebody who loves that kind of crunchy system stuff that comes from the 3.5 games, where getting certain feats would give you little ways of kind of breaking the rules, what we implemented was that you could spend a fate point to gain access to that, and if you had otherwise you would otherwise qualify to take that as one of your feats. You got it for the combat encounter. If you didn't qualify, then you got it for 1 round. And players made really good use of that stuff. It was really, really interesting, and it made it feel, I don't know, it made it feel very, very Conan-y. We had one combat encounter that involved about 30 adversaries, and it took less than an hour to resolve with 4 players, I believe. So, so it's just, I really, really love the warts and all. I love this game, and I really can't wait to run this again. There's a second edition, so this is the Atlantean edition. There is a pocket edition you can get that is also the Atlantean edition. That is just basically the first edition with some errata implemented and some things cleaned up. The page numbers in the Atlantean edition don't track to the first printing of the first edition, so that's a bit frustrating. There's also a second edition that is out. I've heard there's binding issues on the core book for that one. I've not found that with mine yet, but the second edition does not have the full color interiors that the first edition does. And this is what the first edition looks like inside, and I love it. They're such fun books, and there's so many good supplements out for it. They've got they implement this idea that I don't know if they borrowed it from Star Wars Revised or whether Star Wars Revised borrowed it from them, but the idea that you could multi-class, but specific combinations of multi-class could sub out abilities. So many of the source books will offer you effectively new classes that are like combination of 2 basic classes, but with certain things kind of swapped out. The most interesting one I think we saw in our game was there was a combination of a pirate and a scholar. The scholar is just the sorcerer class in this version of Conan. And one of the things you could do as a navigator is you could get an ability called War Chant. You could swap out one of your spell selections to get that. And it felt, not only did it feel really appropriate for that character, but it really made a difference in some fights. So it was really, really cool. And that's just one example of the dozens of different kind of unique combinations you can get with it. So lots of different options for playing this. The line itself is extant now, so you can't buy it. I think you might be able to. No, I don't know if Monolith offers the Conan, the Mongoose version. You did. I got all the PDFs for the Mongoose version from Modifius when they did the Kickstarter for their Conan game. But I don't know who has those now, but you can get print copies of the first edition for not outrageously expensive. For some reason, the second edition is very expensive. The second edition does have basically many of the same people involved, as well as some folks who came to work on the line later. So the second edition is also very, very good, and it is completely cross-compatible. We used many monsters and stuff, for instance, in our recent games using stuff from the second edition bestiary. So phenomenal game. Yeah, I really can't wait to run that again. It's really got my, that's 2 games we ran this year that, 2 games are at least in my top 5 that were related to 3.5. So that may give me some food for thought for next year. Final one, number one, my number one game, I think, for this year is Draw Steel. Now, Draw Steel is, as I mentioned, the sort of 4th edition successor. Oh, don't fall. Please don't fall. 4th edition successor to Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition. This is, and here's the monster. These are the 2 books that are out so far. Where am I going here? Monsters and the Heroes book. This game, at a glance, appears to be much more complicated and difficult to learn than what it actually is. It is not a game, I think, that you can easily use to run a game set in like Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or Eberron or whatever. Maybe Eberron. But it is one of the most fun games I've run. It is, at least this year, it is incredibly engaging for the players because there's lots of cool interrupts they have. The players have a decision to make about initiative as they're going through because the players choose who goes. That's not a unique idea. That's something that you do in most of the 2D20 games as well. But it's a game that seemed to get its hooks into players as much as it did to me, as fast, faster than any other game I've run this year. We had players asking when they were going to be able to play it again, when they were going to be able to make characters for it. It is just a really, really, really well-designed game. Many of the little frustrations or mathematical things that were a bit of a pisser with the 4th edition game, which I really did enjoy, are all smoothed off in this game. It is what it says in the tin: tactical, heroic, cinematic fantasy. It delivers on. It is, yeah, really some of the very best sessions I've had, not just for combat either. Like, it has effectively what is their version of skill challenges from 4th edition D&D and from the Saga edition in Star Wars. And I guess 5th edition has been starting to incorporate that stuff too. I'm telling them, man. The montages are a really interesting addition to that. And the current Kickstarter, they have a Kickstarter going on right now for Draw Steel that includes a book that is just nothing but new implementations of those rules. So tons of ideas you can steal from it. Draw Steel also is phenomenal in that it can be played as effectively with 2 players as it can with 5. It really feels like players, because of the way the math works and because of the way you design encounters, you can have people get a satisfying experience with Draw Steel with a relatively small party, even though you don't have a healer. It's one of the few combat-focused games that does an incredible job of ensuring you don't need to have somebody play cleric or a druid or a bard or whatever. I absolutely love that because that is the shortcoming, I think, of a lot of these other games. I mean, it's designed as intentionally in those games because that gives them sort of, in 4th edition and Pathfinder 2 and D&D 5, it gives healers a spotlight space for them. But this game does a great job of making sure you do not need to have a healer. You can have a satisfying full combat experience without being like, well, shit, we took too much damage, so we're screwed here. Which is not to say that the healer class in this, the conduit and the tactician actually both have really fucking cool ways of augmenting healing or allowing for more healing. So it still gives that space to those character concepts without making it a necessary part. And if you're finding yourself with a difficult or different number of players each time, like we have found over the past year with some of our games, 5th edition, for instance, if you're not running that without a healer, or Pathfinder 2, if you're running that without a healer, it's sometimes really hard to run combat encounters as written. You need to be very careful to not over overburden the characters early in a fight because they're going to die. This, you don't really need to worry about that. You follow the guidelines for it, you're good to go, which means any group of heroes can feel like absolute fantasy badasses, and you can have fun, interesting fights because the adversaries have interesting abilities as well. Even at first level, at starting level, it's genuinely. I was saying earlier this year that Fantasy Craft gave me the best low level or first level experience with any RPG. And then we played this, and both games have strengths of their own, and would definitely suit different types of gameplay. Draw Steel in the introduction for the Heroes book tells you this is not this game. If you want a game that's going to be about survival and whatnot, this is not your game. If you want to play a game where you're going to be, having to carefully plan your encounter before you spring it in an old school kind of way, it's not your game. If you want to do dungeon delving necessarily, where you're like checking for traps every 5 feet and whatever, it's not your game. But if you want something that is a tactical heroic cinematic game, and the cinematic is the part where, because it is combat focused, I think one of the criticisms of 4th edition was the assumption that there wasn't story going on or wasn't role playing going on. And that's just like, I never found that to be the case with 4th edition. But the cinematic component of it allows you to get that through the montages and through a really interesting social interaction thing called, I think it's called negotiations. Might be called audiences. I'm doubting my memory. I think it's negotiations. But it's also one of the best laid out. That's why I'm bothering to look up the name, because it is, negotiation. It also has a downtime rules. Geez, I'm even forgetting about that. Downtime rules are fantastic in the game as well. So it's just an exceptionally well-designed game to be fun and engaging at all times and to keep that story going forward. So I love it. That is the game we're playing on Friday nights, alternating Fridays now before our Warhammer weekends, I think. Wait, is that right? No, it's Friday, the alternate, the Fridays where we're not playing Wrath and Glory. Phenomenal game. I just we've got several sessions where we're introducing the game to new players, or in the last couple of months. So if you do want to see it at the table, we've got plenty of actual plays of that. We also have a new campaign that we're playing called Hogar Must Die, and because we're not going to play in there isn't enough information about the default setting yet. We're playing in a place we're calling Ersatzeroth, which is basically the setting for the World of Warcraft, but with the serial numbers filed off and with changes made to the setting to fit with the sensibilities of Draw Steel as opposed to World of Warcraft, but just as a way of sort of giving us a common place that we can recognize, I guess, but then also make our own. So that's Draw Steel. I don't know if I could spend more time talking about this one in detail. I intend on doing an overview of it soon. I'll wait till that Kickstarter to finish up, and then I'll dive into this. But this is a really, really, really fun game. It would not be a replacement, I would say, for things like our Night Below campaign. We couldn't convert over to this. Our Paradar campaign, we couldn't convert over to this. So games where they are D&D, you would struggle to find direct parallels to what's in Draw Steel. At least you would right now. Maybe they'll have more tools in order to twist it and whatnot later. But with currently there are 2 books out for it in print. There's 1 PDF source book, and then that Kickstarter is going on right now for a mega campaign and another source book called Encounters, which is supposed to be the 3rd core book, which is just a bunch of rules for like tactical encounters, montages, negotiations, which you can use as written or you can adapt for your own thing. Great game. I love it. I would say that I don't think I would ever run 4th edition again now that this is out. But I said the same thing about Pathfinder 2nd edition, and then I later ran 4th. So who knows? But that was my number 1 game. I'm going to take another sip of coffee here. Hey, everybody in chat. Hope you're having a great first day. The first day of the new year. My honorable mention or near one, and again, this is not something that I think is it doesn't speak to it being a bad game. It's just that we only ran this really 2 times, but one of them was quite substantial. Dragonbane. Dragonbane is, in the last 2 years, it has got a lot of hype, I think, online as kind of like an alternate, in particular, was it earlier this year or late last year? I think it was late last year in 2024, around the time when like Pathfinder 2 made the switch to Orc license, and some other publishers did. Troll Lord Games did as well. This became sort of a possible alternative for 5th edition, and the not in the sense that you would necessarily like run the same types of adventures, but like if you wanted to get together and play a role-playing game, Dragonbane was seen as a really, really fun game. And because I'm a bit of a contrarian, I sort of part of me was just like, everyone's talking about it. I don't want to run it. I'm really glad I did, because it's just a really, really, really fun game. Like it reminds me a lot of what I like about Draw Steel, in the sense that there's a lot of fat that has been cut away to allow you to just play a game and have a fun role-playing experience. One thing that looking over the games that I've responded to the most over this, I know that I am the type of player and type of GM that does like to have crunchy rules. Like I like having a good set of rules that I can mull over. I want there to be a game I can make decisions over, and that I can, interact with and take certain positives or negatives about my character. I want there to be that game there. And I, in the past, have run some, or at least some more OSR games. I find myself moving away from that over the last couple of years, and more into these games that have more of a bite to them, where there is a great solid rule set that you can kind of play with. And it's not to say that it needs to be as complicated as what Warhammer Fantasy 4th is. Warhammer Fantasy 4th is, trying to think if there's a comparison here. Like Warhammer Fantasy 4th would be something akin to like an extraordinarily complex motor vehicle with computers and all the other things. So there's a lot of things that are involved in this that make it run smoothly. And it does run smoothly because it's exceptionally well designed. Dragonbane is kind of like an older vehicle that just happens to, everything's in the right place. Everything works properly. Maybe a bicycle. My analogies I should have thought through before I started throwing these out, but there is not an abundance of like exceptions or other rules or sub mechanics or things like that in Dragonbane. Both games, Warhammer Fantasy 4th and Dragonbane, I feel are like appropriately calibrated for their level of complexity. They have just the amount that is needed for that game. Some might say that Warhammer Fantasy 4th is over-engineered, and that's fair, but I feel, for me, it isn't, and Dragonbane is another great example of simplicity in design that just works really, really well at the table. When you embrace the things like random loot and stuff like that, and loot modifiers, the thing that I think that's all really, really fun, but the thing that makes Dragonbane to me stand out is the way that the narrative metacurrency is sort of concealed within the game mechanics. If you haven't played Dragonbane before, one of the things you can do is, if you make any kind of check, whether it's a skill check or an attack or whatever, you can choose to push that roll. You re-roll, and then you take on a penalty for one of your skills that is related to some emotional or psychological state. So like those, or physical state. Those are all related to specific stats, but they include things like exhausted, sickly, dazed, angry, scared, and disheartened. And you can get rid of those through resting. But sometimes you're only able to get rid of one, and especially when you're describing the use of those narrative metacurrencies, it's not really that, it's a function of the game mechanics. But when you're using that push mechanic, the players are always talking about the emotional or physical states of their characters. Like, oh, that really pissed me off, so I'll take the anger, or whatever it is, condition. And it makes for for a game that is pretty light, it makes for a fun little bit of like emotional reminder, I guess. Like I described it as being kind of the Guardians of the Galaxy style of gameplay, not in the smart assery, but in the sense that like the Guardians of the Galaxy films are like operatically emotional. Like it is obvious at the end of the film what the theme of those films were and what sort of emotionality what emotional arc the characters were going through, you know, and that this feels like the RPG equivalent of that, where like I can't think of many other games where you are quite so overtly intentionally adopting certain emotional states for characters, which also give ready explanation for dice work results. So like, oh, I didn't succeed in whatever because I'm too pissed off right now, you know, or I'm too afraid right now, or just too exhausted. And that little bit of extra flavoring makes the game feel different than what many other RPGs do. So I just loved it. Like I said, it was the perfect game in terms of level of complexity, speed of play, differences between characters, so each character could feel unique, and then also the level of engagement that players have with the state, the role playing part of their character, being the emotional state, being reinforced by the mechanics. It's just a brilliant game. This year we'll see two source books coming out, one source book, one adventure, I think, from the official publisher, as well as two books, a monster book and I believe, wilderness survival book from a third-party publisher. We're also going to see Trudvang, the old kind of Norse-inspired setting that was its own game, and then it was released as a 5th edition game as well. Trudvang is coming out for Dragonbane as well, which would be really interesting. Graham, one of our regular players on the channel, has run Dragonbane previously in Trudvang very successfully, so it's I think he's due credit for recognizing a great pairing between Dragonbane in that setting. The Trudvang game has a very interesting mechanic, but it would be one that I would suggest is quite overly engineered. It has some, I think, some good ideas on paper. In practice, it's a colossal pain in the ass to run, and I think the Dragonbane mechanic will be a great pairing with it. So that's my honorable mentions and my top games for 2025. Another one I almost had it on here too was Wrath and Glory. That is the other 4th edition. The other Warhammer 40K game that I have been running on Fridays. We've been playing now 3 sessions of that, and we had 1 character creation session, and it's like Draw Steel. There is a kind of concealed mechanic in the game that allows for sort of, you can have really long fights without necessarily having a healer. Healers are a little more necessary in that game than they are in others, but we have, the last 2 sessions of that have seen our heroes in a running fight where there's just like more constantly spawning enemies for it. And I've run that type of thing before within other games, and this one just feels so good. The players have been able to really dig deep and use some abilities that really let them excel. They've supported one another. All the characters feel like they've got their own sort of niche that they've been occupying in, even just in such a simple concept as get to X before the swarm gets you. It's a really, really good game. I really enjoyed that one as well. And it's very different. It's billed as being the action RPG as opposed to the intrigue RPG that Imperium Maledictum is, at least as far as the 2 40K games on offer from Cubicle 7 are concerned. And it absolutely delivers on that. It's a really, really, it does ask a fair bit. It asks a bit from the players, similar to what Champions does, where like the players need to know what the characters can do. They need to know how certain sub-mechanics work, but boy, oh boy, great, really, really great game. I'm really looking forward to seeing that one continue into 2026. So that's my top 5. Let's talk about a couple of campaigns. So some of our ongoing campaigns, there's absolutely no changes. They're carrying on as they are. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is like that. Warhammer 40K is going to continue on with Wrath and Glory. We've got a long road ahead with that one. Spires of Paradar is going to continue on. And I can't remember if I said Warhammer Fantasy Role. Yeah, I did already. So Spires of Paradar are Pathfinder 2nd Edition campaign, likewise, that's going to keep on going. Our heroes are 8th level, I think, now, and we've got story through till 20th with that, so we got lots of mystery to uncover with that. Our Night Below campaign, which is our longest running game on Wednesday nights, we have, in the last few months, run quite a few pickup games, and it is one of the games that has been most affected lately by scheduling issues and life circumstances issues. It's been very hard, or at the very least, very inconsistent to have the same group of players. And with D&D 5th edition, that's, unless you're designing for that, it can be a hard game to structure. And the way that we've been running Night Below as a sort of, they're at present, spoilers for the next, 2 minutes of the Night Below campaign. So if you're getting caught up on that, just skip ahead 2 minutes, and then I won't spoil anything for you. But at present, the heroes are making their way back to the surface, having done some shit in the Underdark. And that's a dangerous process, which is leading currently into a combat encounter. And when you have only 2 players, neither of which are healers in that, it makes it really, really hard to run that without completely reworking what we just set up as sort of a cliffhanger for it. So we talked about this with the players at our last session, which was to be our last session before the new year. We didn't end up streaming because we spent the whole time discussing sort of what to do. And what we landed on right now is we're going to be running a short campaign that is going to probably take it might take upwards of 6 months, which would be 24 sessions. But it might only be 3 months because we play that every week, which would be 24 sessions? No, 16 sessions. That one is going to be with 5th edition as well, 5th edition 2024 rules, because we really have been enjoying those quite a bit. But the title of the War Story mini campaign is The Orphans of Westkeep. So the adventure is going to take place in a place that the heroes in our main Night Below campaign have not gone, but it relates to stuff that they have been involved with and with the overall plot. Excuse me. Should have taken a bigger sip. The heroes in that are going to start at 3rd level. So we're going to have them start off. They've got... there is a connection to what has been happening in the main campaign with what they're going on, but it's also going to give us an opportunity to see other aspects of some of the bigger threats in that campaign playing out through the eyes of different characters. It isn't necessarily going to have an impact on the other characters, but we don't know. I've got enough material written to cover at least to roughly cover a more extended run. But while we would love to run the Night Below game, our regular campaign, it's just it is very tough to because we can't consistently rely on there being enough players to be able to run that forward. And that's become more and more apparent over the past couple of weeks or past couple of months, what we want to do is make sure there is something we can be playing on a Wednesday consistently, which may involve the same group of players and the same full group of players as the Night Below campaign. Every one of them is making a character for it. But it's something that is going to be designed to make sure if we only have 2 players available, we're still playing that game in the same way that we're doing that with Draw Steel. Because while it is fun to run pickups and things like that, middle of the week scrambling to run something that's going to be satisfying for a 2-hour session, more often a 1 hour and a half session if you're explaining rules and character sheets, that can be fun as a change of pace. I don't think it makes for a very satisfying regular play experience. So that's why we're doing that. Orphans of Westkeep is going to be at least 3 months. It might be longer, but we're just going to have to see how that goes. We're going to play that game the same way we do any of our other ongoing games, which is to say we're going to go at the pace the players are moving. So we don't have a set and then this is done time period for it, but there is an end to, there is a point where we can have a satisfying conclusion to their war story that could be the resolution of it, and then we come back to those characters later, or carry on if we find that circumstances have not changed and we still need to carry on with a campaign that accounts for everybody's availability. I know it's disappointing for not only for the players and for myself, but for the viewers as well, that we're not able to push that same story forward. But one of the things we talked about was potentially reworking that campaign to be something we can run with smaller characters. And what we landed on was, well, then we're not playing the same game. We're just not playing the same campaign that we have been. So why not just save that until we can hopefully find a time where we can continue that game as it's been played thus far and play something that is more heavily not scripted, but more heavily circumscribed for the purpose of a war story, while not abandoning that world or that story or that whatever plots are happening behind in that campaign. So I do not have any info about the characters they're playing yet, but I have full faith that they are going to be excellent characters. We're also, let's see here, speaking of 5th edition, Legacy of the Crystal Shard. We returned to that, and one of the things we talked about with that game, well, let me just grab the book and hold it up once again. Yep. So, this is the Rime of the Frost Maiden, but Legacy of the Crystal Shard is behind me. That campaign came back. Originally, it was played very much like our Night Below campaign, where we sort of we really embraced the overland journeys and the random encounters and all that kind of stuff, which was great when we played every second week or every week. The last 2 sessions 2 sessions we've had when we returned. Let me back up. When we returned to that game, what the intent was to shift the style of play to be, we're only playing once a month. So we wanted to create something that was a bit more story focused and less combat of the week kind of thing that we had been playing, or overland travel on a day-by-day basis. And we did some great planning. We did some great role playing using the downtime stuff. And then we jumped into the travel. And one session of it was quite good, I think. And then we got into and this was my own fault, I allowed it to sort of get to a point where we're just having fights again. And it's not necessarily, that's not a bad thing. Fights in 5th edition are a lot of fun. And player characters in the 2024 version, in particular, because they've upgraded healing. Healing is much more effective in 2024 than it was in 2014. You can have really tense fights that are against challenging adversaries. The trouble is when you're only playing a month and you're allowing it to go to we're fighting, random frost giant George who we happen to encounter. Is that what you want to have spent your once a month session doing? And maybe the answer to that is yes. And maybe sometimes that's important, but we had basically 2 back-to-backs. It felt like we had 2 back-to-back sessions that were quite combat heavy. And I recognize in thinking about the game that I'm not doing in that game what I said I was going to do, which is to structure it to be satisfying monthly play that pushes the story forward, as opposed to oh, let's go loot this cavern, thing. And I'm going to fix that. I've full faith that we're going to be able to get that to the pacing that it was. But it's, boy, oh boy, what a terrific setting to be back in. I will say that there is a new source book that came out for Adventures in Faerun, which is one of the 2 source books that came out this year for Forgotten Realms. It's got tons of good stuff for use in that setting. I'm not going to, I mean, there's other channels that are more 5th edition focused that will do proper reviews of the stuff. But I've got the books that came out late 2025 were the 2 books for Forgotten Realms for new 5th edition, and the Forge of the Artificer, the new book for Eberron. And actually, it builds on what's in the first Eberron book, so it doesn't replace it by any means. All 3 of those books, fucking awesome. Like, great material for GMs and for players, front to back. And in contrast with some of the last releases that we saw for that, like the Spelljammer one that was really lackluster and the Planescape one that was really lackluster, these feel like they feel like they're getting they're more on the track of what I want from my D&D stuff. And to be honest, it feels more like what you're getting from Pathfinder 2. Pathfinder 2 source books almost always I find to be satisfying because there's something in there I can use. It's not quite as good as, say, like the Modiphius Star Trek books or the Modiphius books that are released for 2D20 games. Those are often front to back incredible source books. But very good. Very, very good, though. Or like the Warhammer Fantasy stuff that's released by Cubicle 7. So that's what we're doing with those 2. Another change. 2 things I'll mention. Speaking of 2D20 games, one thing that was curious looking back on the year that was 2025, there are 2 types of games that we used to run a lot more often that were completely absent from this year. One of them is Savage Worlds, which we didn't touch at all this year. And the second one was the 2D20 games. Those would be like Acton Cthulhu, Homeworld, Infinity, Conan, Dishonored, John Carter. We didn't get any, or Star Trek. We didn't get any of those games to the table this year, which is interesting because we have there was a time when we ran an awful lot of the 2D20 games on the channel, especially early in the channel life. So speaking of, let's talk about what we got planned for the Guard. Because we were having difficulty getting, but I'm telling you, man, I know. This is one of Anna's favorites. I'm trying to find it, sweetie. Where did I leave it? Oh, it's not there. Let's see. Oh, boy. Oh, yeah, there it is. Thank you very much. Good dog. Good dog. All right, so one of the games we ran this year that was surprisingly satisfying, particularly when we made use of cheat sheets and the new character sheets, and that is the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game. There are, at the time of recording, source books out for this for the Avengers, the X-Men, and Spider-Man, as well as an adventure for involving Kang. There is a source book coming out soon for, or not a source book, an adventure for Secret Wars. And then I can't remember if it's Fantastic Four or something else that's coming out as a source book. But in any event, there's more than enough material out for it right now, plus rules for creating your own characters. It has it requires that the players be prepared and be aware of what their abilities are. Like, a character sheet for this will include a list of powers. Like, let me take a look at where's Spider-Man here. Where are you, Pete? Where are you, buddy? Here we go. So this is Spider-Man's character sheet. There it is. Okay, this is going to be... I think I screwed up with my camera this time. All right, let's just do Miles... Or who is this? Miguel? Oh, there he is, Pete. Okay, so... This is the list of powers. Oop, there we go. Each of those has a set of separate kind of rules to them. So not all of them are active powers in the sense that you have to know to use them as an action. Some of them are background stuff, but it's stuff that you need to be aware of for most part. There's some things that will just be in the background. And you need to know what they do in order to make satisfying tactical decisions in combat. But if you have a cheat sheet, or I don't know where the hell it is, because Come On is just like behind in delivering everything. There's a basic set that's coming out that has some cards that have those powers on them. If you have those powers in an easily accessible format, it is super fucking fun. It really feels like it's not quite as much of a nitty gritty combat simulator as what Champions is, but it really feels like the source material, the comics, not the films. There are fun little nods to the old school TSR game in there, in the sense that there's karma, and it isn't like a phase rip abilities the way that one was, with fighting, agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, psyche. Instead, you have your Marvel stats, which is melee, agility, resilience, vigilance, ego, and logic. And you have a health pool and you have a karma pool, and then, or karma, is it karma pool or ego pool? I don't remember. What is it? Focus pool. Forgive me. That might be something that's a nod to another older Marvel game. But in any event, the game has, like, instead of levels, it has tiers of play. So you've got power level 1 to 6, which runs the full gamut from, like, you know, Aunt May all the way up to Galactus or Thanos. There are certain powers that the game just recognizes as being like, okay, there's no game rules for this. You can just do certain things with this, and here's how you sort of adjudicate that at the table. And I think that's a clever conceit of the difficulty of simulating what the setting is, or what the source material has. It was funny because when I was talking to the players afterwards, we had a lot of fun running. We ran 3 sessions of it, featuring the Punisher and Wolverine as kind of the stars, and then we had guest stars playing different characters over the course of the 3 sessions, and including Blade, and who else was in that? Colossus was one guest star, and it's a great game, especially if you're using a battle mat. Super fucking fun. The players feel appropriately heroic. It feels like there's enough game mechanic there to be able to. There's a really fun thing of re-rolling dice. So when they've got a mechanic similar to 5th edition's advantages and disadvantages. It's called edges and trouble. If you have edge, after you roll your 3 dice, you can pick one of them to re-roll, and then you take the higher of the 2. If you have trouble, the adversary picks one of your dice for you to re-roll, and then you take the lower of the 2. And fortunately, the Roll20 sheet automates all that stuff. You also roll 3 different dice, or rather, dice of 2 different colors. One of them, you can play with whatever you want. They've got the official Marvel die. 2 of them will be normal dice. One of them will be a different color, which has the Marvel symbol in place of the 1. These are like casino dice. Opposite sides will add to 7. If a Marvel result comes up, it counts as a 6 as far as like the sum of your dice roll. But if you happen to roll a success as well as a Marvel dice, it becomes a fantastic success. And that has consequences. It's kind of like a critical. It also means that more often than not, you're succeeding whenever you're rolling dice, because one of your dice has 2 6s on it. You kind of got jack dice. It also means that if you roll Marvel dice and fail, you have a fantastic fail. If you happen to roll 6s on the other 2 dice, which would mean you would be rolling a 6, 1, 6, that is an ultimate fantastic result, which can have specific results. The game is a bit of a work in progress, because each of the different source books has added in new rules, but every little bit of new stuff that's been added in has made the game better. The Avengers rules has rules for like narrative metacurrency for villains who don't have access to karma. They've added in more details about mooks for like individual, for minion type characters in both Spider-Man and Avengers. And they've added in powers over the course. It's also very easy to customize the characters as much. So mechanically, the game is a lot of fun, and there's some really good source books that are out for it now. what I thought was that players wouldn't necessarily like to play existing superheroes. You know, when I've run stuff, especially of late, more often than not, I have players asking to make their own characters. So like, oh yeah, well, we'll play champions, we'll play, you know, whatever, mutants and masterminds. If I ran that, but I was surprised by how much people really loved playing the Marvel characters. And when we were trying to decide what to do with that Saturday morning, one of our players, Jeff, made a pretty adamant pitch for Marvel. And I shouldn't say adamant, a really compelling pitch for like, look, let's just open it up for the rest of the roster. And we've got a group of players now who we can regularly play Marvel. And if we need to add more people in, we can do that. And we're going to play a 6-month adventure. So it'll basically be a 12-part maxi series featuring characters from the X-Men. We don't know who they're going to be, but it's going to be existing characters from the X-Men in our own, you know, version of the Marvel Universe. And the plan is for it to be one arc that we're playing from start to finish. We may see other characters come and go, and we also may see players swap out who they're playing because they may want to play a different character, either because of the circumstances or whatever. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I had an enormous amount of fun writing the 3-part adventure that we played before. The setup that we're going to be playing in this one, I think, is going to be pretty interesting. And the game itself is just a shit ton of fun. It does like some of the other games I've discussed, it does ask a bit of the characters. So you do need to know what all those little powers do. But if you do know what those are, they give you some really interesting decisions to make over the course of Superhero Slugfest. And it makes each of the characters feel different. When we played, setting aside that obviously one is a melee, one is a range character, but like Wolverine and Punisher and Blade all felt very different from one another at the table, and it was awesome. So we're really looking forward to that. I think that's going to be an awful lot of fun. Our Night Below campaign we've already talked about. Our Draw Steel game we've already talked about. Let's talk about Traveler. So we had been playing Traveler for quite some time on our starting with the Borderland Run It module and then continuing on with that same crew, the crew of the Rift Wanderer. Amazing group of players, incredible group of characters they all came up with, and an enormous amount of fun playing that. And then we fell victim to scheduling, and then decided to do something different, so what we did is we talked over the time before the holidays about what to do. And what we have landed on is we're going to play a 6-month adventure that is going to be using, and this is what we, after playing with or suggesting and discussing a bunch of other potential games, we have landed on using Mithras to play a Mythic Britain adventure. And it'll be set in Gwynedd, I think is the name of the kingdom. So Wales. And we're going to be making characters. It's not this coming weekend. It's next weekend. We're doing character generation on stream. I've run Mithras a couple of times before, and I've run Pendragon a couple of times before. But that's really the extent of my involvement with Arthurian myths. And Mithras is a game I've only run it with the Classic Fantasy add-on, which makes it play kind of like D&D, but with a different set of rules. If RuneQuest was combined with basic D&D or classic OSR style D&D, that's what Classic Fantasy would be. This is going to be my first time playing in Mythic Britain, but I'm really, really excited by it. The sourcebook is really cool. The game itself is something I love. The combat rules in Mithras, because of the players have interesting decisions to make at all times, which is really cool. The advancement is pretty simple and fairly character focused, with letting them, roll to see how much their skills go up over time. And the setting is going to be really interesting. I think it'll be a challenge for me in the sense that it's not a setting I have given a lot of thought to running in before. But we've got a really enthusiastic group of players, most of which is our Traveler crew as well. But I think it's going to be awesome. That game in a sort of similar way to Dragonbane, also prioritizes passions and, or at least incorporates passions and emotional states and interests in a way that can actually affect dice rolls. So that's going to also be really, really interesting. When we're done that first 6 months, we're going to re-examine and see what the next 6 months look like. But we wanted, again, to make sure we were picking something we can consistently play, get a satisfying story out of, and have kind of a beginning to end, not only for the players, but also for the folks at home as well. So you'll be able to get a full story out of whatever is going on in that campaign. So really excited about it. It's going to be a magical Britain, so it's going to be a little more, I mean, I know that you can make Pendragon whatever you want, but we're leaving it open for the possibility of player character mages and player characters who aren't knights and stuff like that in this game. So and also just because I really enjoyed Mithras, and a lot of us wanted to get it back to the table, so that's why we're going with that. In addition to those ongoing games, we have some quasi-recurring games. Now, one of the things we ran last year, or started running last year, was our 10th year anniversary game playing Shadow of the Weird Wizard. And I don't like putting up negative content, but I did not enjoy that the mechanics in that game in the least. I think the characters were amazing. I think I noticed that there have been substantial rewrites to the combat system and to the character. Like, every monster got a rewrite over the holidays. They released an updated version where they basically they reworked the math on a bunch of different things, and we played before that happened, and I did not enjoy that game in the least. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I don't need to go on further, but we did end up with that group play Symbaroum afterwards, and we had a lot of fun with that one. But when we were talking about what to do, whether we wanted to continue on with that, there was only a couple folks who were able to carry on with, or interested in carrying on with, Symbaroum, and that's not a game you can play with only 2 or 3 players. So because we had those days set aside for, or sort of had tentatively set aside some dates in the next 6 months to play Symbaroum, I asked if there was any interest in playing some of the other games that were very close to some of our replacement games that we were talking about running in our other slots, and we had some goers, or some takers on that. So our first game actually coming up this coming weekend that we'll be playing, we're playing 2 sessions of each of these games. They'll be every 4 weeks we'll be playing them. First up is Ars Magica 5th edition. Now, after we set this as the next game to play, they've also released the PDFs for the definitive edition. And as much as I am really excited to get into that, I hate reading things in PDF, and I'm not going to learn a game in 3 days. So we're not using the definitive edition, but we're using 5th edition. But I'm very, very, I've mentioned this game many, many times before as one of my white whales. I was fortunate to get the game to the table for half of an adventure in 2024, but I'm really excited to get a 2-parter, a full adventure using this game. If you're not familiar with Ars Magica, it is a game set in a mythic version of Europe, which you can make mythic mean whatever, kind of works for you. But it is a place where magic is real, as well as the influence of the divine, the fairy, the infernal, and the magical. So there are sort of these different realms of power that have influence over the setting. You play kind of 2 tiers of characters. Every player in the default troop style of play, every player has a wizard character as well as a companion character, which is sort of like a more effective or potent version of a player character. And then the Covenant, which makes up all the wizards and the companions, also has a number of grog characters who are like supporting characters. And everyone shares those. You take your turn, playing them. And then again, in the default style of play, every season you go out and have an adventure with one of the wizards and everyone else playing companions. And then they bring whatever grogs are necessary for that adventure. and then the next season you swap out to a different person's character or different person's wizard. We're not necessarily going to play in the troop style play, but I'm just really excited to get back to this. The one session we ran was really, really fun. I wasn't quite sold on it enough to sort of like force it to a higher in the list place, but in part that was also for 2025. But in part that was because I wasn't aware that there were other players who were really interested in playing it. So I'm excited to get that one to the table. The other games that we have in those kind of every 4 weeks slot where we will be playing, two of them include the Unofficial Elder Scrolls RPG. Since we last ran this, let me get the non-shiny version. There we go. Boom. Whoopsies. I am having trouble with my camera today. There we go. This one, if you're not familiar with this, it has parts of Mithras. It has parts of, I think, Zweihander. It has parts of the Dark Heresy RPG, oddly enough. But it is really its own thing. I mentioned this in my last year in review. This has now become a finalized version of it. And we had a lot of fun with it last time. Not 2025, but in 2024, we played it a fair bit. So I'm really excited to get that one back to the table as well. We are also getting one of the other picks, Shadowrun 6th edition. This is the Berlin source book. Shadowrun we did not run last year in 2025, but we had run it on and off. Shadowrun remains one of my all-time favorite RPGs. I cannot wait. I love the 6th edition. I've only run it twice, but I really, really love the more streamlined version of the rules without it going so abstracted the way that Shadowrun Anarchy is. And where are my other ones here? Oh, another one is Fading Suns. Fading Suns, the one session I ran of it was a lot of fun, and it's one of those games that I did not expect to enjoy it quite as much as I did. It was really, really, really good. I think it's a different kind of, like, as a Draw Steel was one of those games, and Fantasy Craft were one of those games that you just, for this type of experience, this is the perfect game for that. I love that stuff. Fading Suns is not the game for every table. It is not the game for every adventure, but I love everything that it does. It's got so many interesting ideas in it, and it resolves some of the issues that I feel slow down play with like 2D20 games in the way that it does its dice pool, not dice pool, but it's like narrative metacurrency resource generation stuff. I'm not going to get into explaining it right now because it's just, I'll end up spending far too long and probably won't do a good job of it. The last one I'm going to mention for the 2026 every 4 week games, the Mass Effect game that we played before. That one likewise is definitely on the list of returning to. We only played one proper session of it, and then I played one shot with Jeffrey as well. Genuinely, I think the best run and gun experience I've had in any RPG. Wrath and Glory comes close, but I still think that the way that Mass Effect, that RPG felt with the regenerating shields, if you're curious of what there is a link in our, I think it's in our, well, I mean, you can find it with the Google search as well, but in the 3.5 channel on the Dungeon Musings Discord server, you can find a link to those full rules, which are still available for free. It is based on the Star Wars revised rule set with stuff thrown in from Spycraft, but also a lot of mechanics from Mass Effect 2 put into the game. It's very busy. There's a lot of things moving in it. There's some stuff that is not terribly clear, or it maybe kind of assumes that you know certain things from other games, but it is outstanding. It was such a fun session, and I can really see, you may not think that, it's based on a role-playing game, or based on a video game rather, so therefore it wouldn't be suitable for a proper sci-fi game. There's a lot of small conceits about the setting for the video game that make it an exceptional RPG to play. And using a system like the 3.5 system that is so like nitty gritty in the sense that players get to make lots of interesting decisions, but also has like lots of variety in it, makes for, I don't know, it felt very grounded and tense and satisfying. Like it was a really, really good. Again, another one of those games that requires players need to track certain cooldowns and things like that. So it is not the game for every table, but we enjoyed the shit out of that. Even players who normally don't like a lot of crunch in their games seem to be really engaged with it and have asked to play again. So really looking forward to running that one. I'll do a couple more just grab bag. Conan Mongoose, I definitely want to run that again this year because it's just absolutely love that game. We tend to run at least one Conan game per year. Some of the other games, last year we played, I can't remember if it was 2-part or 1-part Star Wars revised game. I don't think I did a terribly, I enjoyed this session, but I think I could have done better with that one. I was a little too trying to force an Andor, homage out of that session that I think I could have done a better job of slow building. But the game mechanics in it, it's really, really good. I think it's a good, I like the Saga edition, but this one feels a little more, because there's a little bit more detail. In the Saga edition, for instance, you either have a skill and you're trained in it, or you don't have a skill and you're not trained in it. There's a much smaller skill list, and you get skills a lot slower, which means that whatever you start with often is sort of what your skills are going to be like for the rest of the game. This is more akin to the D&D 3.5 or Pathfinder, school, where you get skill points and you can spread them around how you want. You could be really good at certain things. You could be bad at, or kind of moderately good at a bunch of things. The force rules in this are a little more grounded, I think, than they are in Saga edition. That's a subjective thing. So like, if you felt differently and you feel that this one was too overpowered or whatnot, that's fair too. But in my experience, I enjoyed it. And it's one of these ones that I think I always love a game where the second edition of the game is sort of like a clarified statement of that previous game. Star Trek Adventure Second Edition, for instance, is a great example of that. Excellent sort of restatement of everything they were doing in Star Trek First Edition, just with a couple things clarified or cut off to make it a clear expression of that game. This is like that, and it has much less books out for it than what the previous version or what Saga Edition ended up with, about, like 15 books out for it. This has maybe 6. And what that means is they have to cram a lot of the great ideas they had from the first edition into this revised one in a more cohesive and clarified way. So all the books have great stuff in it, including in the Hero, I think it's the Galaxy Guide, has some of the best advice I've ever heard about running not only a Star Wars game, but running a game that is based on a media property. I want to run this one in part because I've had such good times with other 3.5 type games, and because including Mass Effect and Conan and whatever. So I'm really looking forward to that. Likely around May is probably when we're going to be returning to that, if history is any indicator. Another very close, not only to a replacement game, but also something that was very close to being our holiday campaign, Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. There's been a couple more source books. Anna in particular loves Vampire. Vampire 5th edition, if you're not familiar with it, it has particularly if you're only familiar with the old World of Darkness Vampire books, or any of those World of Darkness games, the storyteller system from that has been completely excised. This is a brand new system. It is still a dice pool system. It is much faster running. It is designed by Kenneth Haidt. I mention that only because some folks were not aware that particularly cumbersome system that the other World of Darkness books were saddled with has been completely excised. Vampire has also seen a bunch of really cool source books come out for it recently. And last year, I had picked up a bunch of the Vampire Dark Ages stuff, particularly relating to Transylvania. And I was very keen on running a modified version of the Transylvanian Chronicles. That still remains the case, but I'm going to keep it to a one-shot. At some point, I want to do a 1 or 2 part session and see how it feels, because the one time I have run this, I really, really, really enjoyed the mechanics. I think it's a very, very good implementation of that, and of that idea, with a much it's everything that I liked about the classic World of Darkness, but with a much more palatable game mechanic driving the whole, or game engine at least driving the whole thing. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the last 2 ones are, one of them, this is another recency thing. I just finished rewatching season 1 of this show with my folks, because I knew they wouldn't watch it on their own, so I wanted to see if they would like it. Fallout. And we've run Fallout a couple of times on the channel. I don't have a big connection to the Fallout games. I tried playing third, and just it was not for me. Those I tend to want more clear focus on what to do with my games and stuff, and I got distracted and bored by the Fallout 3 game I tried playing. But I've had a similar experience with like Skyrim and with Obsidian, and what is it? Whatever Elder Scrolls 4 is called. Not Obsidian, Oblivion. Same thing too, where I just kind of get, because it's so wide open, and I don't have a clear sense of purpose, I get distracted and get bored. But that is a fault of mine, not those games. They're very, very popular. And this RPG is sort of like the most, I don't know, level-focused version of a 2D20 game that we've run. I really enjoyed the sessions we ran of it. We ran a couple ones where the players were playing Vault Survivors, kind of just freshly waking up. And then we played one that was a mashup of the... the Pendragon mega campaign, the Great Pendragon campaign with this RPG. And that was a lot of fun as well. So I've been thinking about that of late. So that is a maybe. But if we're going to run a 2D20 system, which I've kind of not soured on necessarily, but just I'm really not as jazzed by them. The most fiddly and crunchy of those games, like, we might as well go big or go home. And that's with the Infinity role-playing game. I don't know anything, or I did not know anything about the setting the first time I ran this, and I had not fully digested the rules for this, and I ran a terrible first session for this for some of our players. And since that time, I have found there's a YouTube channel whose name I cannot remember, but they have an excellent overview of the history of the setting, of the factions in the setting, in a very digestible format that made it clear to me, like, for one, oh, this is what this is supposed to be about, and to see possibilities for the story. As well, I think in 2026, we're going to see an animated series set in Infinity come out again. And it's not... I enjoyed the Arcane series that was put out for the League of Legends one, to the point where I got very close to running a fan-made RPG in that same setting on the channel. But I think that when that comes out, I'm probably going to enjoy the series from the snippets I've seen thus far. And there's a couple other players on the channel who seem very invested in Infinity. So yeah, so Infinity is one of those games that I really would like to get. Probably one of our every 4 weeks thing. We'll do a 2-parter, but I really want to dive in and see, with all the crunch and and fiddly bits that come with this particular implementation of the 2D20 system, which was the second version actually as well. Mutant Chronicles 3rd edition was the first book game that had the 2D20 system, but this was a second, followed by Conan afterwards, which meant that it was a lot more over-designed or over-engineered than what some of the later versions like Fallout were. So it might be interesting to see kind of like an early iteration of it and a later iteration of it. And I think that brings us to the end. Although there is one other thing I should talk about. You may have noticed that I've talked a lot about a bunch of 3rd and 3.5 games, and every overview I have at the end of the year, I tend to circle back to the fact that I've done an overview of second edition AD&D, and I've done an overview of fourth edition, but I have not done one of 3.5. And I invested pretty heavily in a catalog of those in preparation for running that. But I didn't want to do it until I had run more 3.5 at various levels to get myself refreshed, my memory refreshed as to what the game experience was like, so I can give a, say something useful about what the play experience is like at the table for it. 2026. Is this our year to play some D&D 3.5 on the channel, and I can finally get the overview done? All signs kind of point towards that. We have no plans for that as of yet, but I'm going to start poking at some ideas for that, because running some of the games we have run over this past year, I am reminded of many of the strengths of that game. I know there are shortcomings with that game as well, particularly when you get to higher levels and the math starts kind of breaking down or whatnot, but played between 3rd and about 12th level, there's some really fucking great gameplay that can be had there, without, and in particular, if you restrict yourself to the D&D products, not going into Pathfinder 1, although we had a lot of fun with that Pathfinder 1 campaign that we played for, I don't know, about 6 or 7 sessions early last year, Last of the Falling Leaves. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, so I don't know. 3.5 is something that is going to be sitting here on the first day of this coming year. It is something that I'm thinking a lot about. So we'll see how this comes together. I've got a lot of other things that I need to prep for before I can get to that. But this may be the year we finally get, or I finally get my footing back in again with 3.5, and I'm able to provide a proper overview of that game for those who may be interested. Let me check on questions. Okay. Hey, everybody. Let's see here. Pendragon was one of the most exciting I've seen you guys play in a couple of years. Is there any more plans for that game? Love the combat mechanics. Oh, that is awesome to hear, Wayne. I own the most recent version of Pendragon, and it does look really, really good. But I think for running an Arthurian game, Mithras is the one we're going to be doing right now. It is a different... Pendragon is very much the Greg Stafford, the author of the original Pendragon. It's his vision of what an Arthurian RPG should be. The Mythic Britain one is informed more by, I think it's Bernard Cromwell's novels. So it's more of like a slightly low fantasy historic version of the game. Let me see here. It is... yeah, Bernard Cromwell, whose Warlord Chronicles were a huge inspiration and influence, and of course Greg Stafford, the author of Pendragon. So that is great to hear, though. I know there are a number of players who do enjoy Pendragon, and I had a surprising amount of fun when I ran that several years ago. So never say never. That's good to know. Mothership was an epic stream. I'm really glad to hear that you enjoyed the Mothership one. Let's see here. Happy New Year, Anna. Thank you very much, THX. I will pass that along. Okay. Thank you for the kind words about Paradar. That is wonderful. Wick, thank you so much for the Happy New Year's. I hope the New Year is off to a great one for you. Thank you, Dude Guy. Hope that the New Year is off to a great start for you as well. Let's see here. No questions. That is great. I mean, either I'm answering them all ahead, or let's see here. I'm glad to hear the folks are enjoying Paradar still too. That is wonderful. I love that that campaign. It's one of the few ones where we've got a group of players who are dedicated to seeing that slow burn through to the end, and there's nothing more gratifying for the type of DM that I am, with a slow, slow burn style writing. David, Happy New Year to you too. I see in chat. Let's see. Tomo, many happy returns back to you. Okay, I think we've got... I don't think we have any answer questions. Oh, and Uncle Mojo is excited for Mithras. That is awesome to hear. Yeah, and like a traveler, you know, it is not a decision that was made lightly, for sure. And in the same way it is for any campaign. But I think that what we're and Traveler is one of those games where we inevitably get back to it. There's a gravitational force with that game that we tend to come back to it, and when we are able to get back to it and have a consistent time spent with it, it is such a great, there's so many great interlocking systems in that game. Likewise, to similar to what I said about Dragonbane, where it has just the right amount of engineering in it. It feels like there's great mechanics to engage with in there that feedback into the story experience without it being fussy, you know, and in a way that sci-fi games sometimes can be. So, yeah, fantastic. All right. Then, guys, or folks, I should say, that I think brings us to the end. Let me make sure I've got everything. I think I've addressed everything that I wanted to talk about. So, yeah, it has been it's been a strange year, to be honest. For the past year, away from the table, things have been chaotic in some cases, but this has been a regular source of stability and joy, and that's not only from playing with such terrific players as I'm fortunate enough to play with, but also the interaction with such lovely and insightful members of the community too. It is always a pleasure to hear from folks who it gets, in particular, we've had at least a couple of people over the last little bit who I've heard from who have got back into role playing because of some of our streams, or have found certain games that they did not know about before because of our streams. And that is nothing that brings me more joy than having other people want to share this hobby and share their, you know, their adventures with other players. That is so fucking cool to hear. But that'll bring us to the end of our stream. We're at a respectable just over 2 hours right now. So Anna Banana has been very patient throughout that. I'm going to go see what she, give her some chow and cuddle with her for a bit. But as is always the case, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns regarding anything I've talked about today, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll endeavor to reply in a timely fashion. There's also a link in the description to the Dungeon Musings Discord server. We have channels dedicated to the many games that we've talked about today over there, as well as things like Find a Group, GM discussion, virtual tabletop chat. There is a terrific, helpful, knowledgeable, and friendly community over there. You are more than welcome to join us. There's also a link down below to our friends at Noble Knight Games. I don't have a discount code for them right now, but Noble Knight Games is the preeminent unionized retailer of hard-to-find and out-of-print RPGs in North America. Not only do they have an incredible selection of new role-playing games, board games, and card games, they have an unmatched selection of hard-to-find and out-of-print RPGs like many of the RPGs we've talked about today. And for those listening at home, thank you so much for joining us, however much you did in 2025, for joining us into 2026. We hope to have some really exciting sessions and some interesting games for you to engage with in the coming months. And as always, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that we gave you today a couple of hours to take your mind off the troubles of our world and think about the troubles, not the troubles, the fun and the games we've had over the past year and what is to come. And until we see you again, stay safe, stay healthy, happy gaming, and Happy New Year.